Okay, everyone, welcome to Medicine Buddha tonight. So please, everyone, take your time getting settled, coming into the room. We're just going to spend a few minutes waiting for everyone to get settled into the space. Welcome to those of you who are new um, to the space and practicing with us. It's so nice to see you here. Welcome back to everyone who's been here before as well. Um, and whenever you are ready, you can add prayer requests to the chat box, and you can add questions. I think at the bottom of your screen, in the Ask a Question um, section there as well. Okay. So also you can, if you would like to, you can just do a little check-in in the chat box as well. Just letting me know how you're doing, or what you need as well. I take requests as well. So thank you to everyone who joined me yesterday for mother practice. Maybe I should change the name to Mummy Dearest practice, but maybe that may be triggering for some of us. But thank you all for joining us for practice yesterday. Okay, who's here? Elizabeth, it's good to see you. Welcome. See Jeffrey talking about creativity. Yeah, well, I think creativity is definitely about fluidity and spontaneity and all of that. To think differently, to think outside of the box, um, to be resourceful, creative, all of that. Yeah, I love that. All right. So tonight it's going to continue with what we've been doing the past couple of weeks. So we're definitely continuing with Durga at the very end, and I'm curious for those of you who've been doing Durga with me, um, or the Durga mantra rather, what your experience of Durga has been as we added into the Medicine Buddha main practice. So if you have any reflections, go ahead and put those into the chat box. Let's see. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm nearing the end of, or rather, I should say, I'm almost finished with the first draft of the new book, which I am extremely excited about because I would love to get my life back. So every ounce of energy and creativity is going into writing. Of course, some of who are artists and writers and creators and everything, like you kind of get that, but when you're just like so immersed, in the work. And it's just the work is demanding everything, all my extra time, like all of my extra creative energy, like, you know, choosing to do the work um, over like hanging out and, you know, being out in the world or going to Target, you know, some of the favorite things I'd like to do, right? So I'm excited. Um, that also because it's just, you know, when you're creating something, um, some of you know, again, when you're creating something, at least for me, I would say for me, I don't always know what the end product is going to be because my process is just having just a very expansive theme, right? You know, and then just like just creating, and always kind of looking back at the theme, but just like focusing on the creating of the work. And so, and I always write in a way where I'm not really super aware of what it is that I'm doing, if that makes sense. Like I think the work is one thing until other people start, you know, relating to it. And then the work becomes something different, which I also too find very exciting to go through that experience where you thought it was one thing and then it turns out to be something different. That's definitely the case with with both Love and Rage and Radical Dharma, where I just felt like I was like, I don't know what this is. Well, with Radical Dharma, I knew what it was. I just didn't think it was interesting. So I was just like, this is just like very um, like I was just like, you know, um, but that happens too because you spend so much time with something, right? And it's just like, and you kind of get tired. Like you just kind of like, okay, whatever. Here's this book again, you know. And I've been working on this book. I mean, for you know, it'll be 2 years in June and July. I mean, it is June now, so it is 2 years. Like it's been working on this for 2 years from the very initial beginning, the beginning of the idea, um, till now, right? And it almost feels like it's now that like most of the work is happening. But that's also part of my process. Like when I get close to a deadline, a real deadline for something, then everything is just open. Everything is just coming out, flowing out into the page, which I also really love. It's a really great space to be in, but also it's a lot of energy to hold as well. So I'm just burning my incense. I love incense. I love scent offerings. If you have incense, if you can do incense, I know some of us have strong sensitivities to scent, you know, but usually the more natural the incense is, the better it is. But having incense really just, for me, changes energy, it shifts energy in a space. Um, you know, incense can be used for so many different things. One, to cleanse energy. Secondly, as an offering to other beings um, in the space. It's also considered a fire puja as well. So using fire to create transformation, right? So you're turning, you know, the smoke, the substance. Well, you're turning the substance into smoke, and the smoke and can be thus offered in various ways. You can offer it as prayer. Uh, you can offer it, well, it's prayer really. You know, puja, fire puja is prayer. Um, so just offering this, like, so when you offer puja, just really offering it um, and dedicating it. You know, I offer this to Tara, I offer this to Medicine Buddha, I offer this to the earth, whatever it may be for you. You can offer it on behalf of people we've lost, who've transitioned. into the spirit world. Um, in Tibetan practice, we use incense also to invite uh, deities and other energies into the space, not just cleansing, but inviting. One way you see that is that in ritual, sometimes you'll take a stick of incense and kind of offer it, wave it in front of a statue or a representation of a deity. That's an invitation for that deity to take up residence in that statue, or whatever is depicting that deity. Well, so many different uses, but anyway, I have incense. I have incense in every room. I have, whenever I see incense that I like, I buy it. When I do big fire pujas outside in the backyard, I always offer a lot of incense at the beginning of that practice. And fire puja, I know this it's something that I'm going to teach later on, somehow, um, in some form. So anyhow, so just a reminder for those of you getting into the room, go ahead and add your prayer requests. We're gonna get started pretty soon. I just want to do a lot of practice tonight. And let's say I want to do a lot of practice, and then an hour later I'm still talking about something random. But today I really am. I'm going to do more practice, just a couple more minutes. Again, welcome to those who are new to the space. This is just to let you know, this is a guided practice. And this is a kind of practice where so just to put this into context, like when I began practicing, right, in the Tibetan tradition, and we would get these texts. Actually, I wonder if I can reach up and get some of these texts. Maybe I should do it. Wait, it's just right on. Maybe I won't be able to do it. Oh, pray for me. If I grunt harder, I'll get it. Okay. Oops. This is a small one actually. So this is I'll just show you just really briefly what I'm talking about for those of you who are new to Tibetan tradition. So this is actually a small we call it Pecha holder. And Pecha are the traditional practices and prayers that you would chant. So you would sit down, and then you would just open. So it becomes like a little altar. So you open it up, right? And then you have all your practices here, and you put this little flap down. And this is something, this Pecha holder is actually something my roommates gave me when I was living in Boston, preparing to transition to the monastery. My roommates, whom I was living with, I was living in this little collective community. It was just like 4 of us, and they all got together and got me this Pecha holder. So when I went to the monastery, I would have them. I have tons of these now, but that will just show you what I'm talking about in terms of practices. So this is white hollow. I'll just show you this. So essentially, this is what it looks like. I know you can't see the writing, but this is the style that you'll get. I know the light is a little tough, right? Okay, there you go. So this is what you get. This is the Pecha. You'll see the writing at the very top. You'll see Tibetan script. Oops. Let me see. You'll see Tibetan script. Then in the middle there, you see Chinese script. And then under that, you'll see the English. So this is a white Mahakala sadhana, or practice. And so white Mahakala, and as well as all Mahakalas, are are expressions of, or not expressions, right? Expressions of Chenrezig. And Chenrezig is the bodhisattva of love in the Tibetan pantheon. Chenrezig is related to Tara and Kuan Yin and Avalokiteshvara. I won't be able to say it tonight. I've lost it. But related to this family of deities associated with love. And let's see. So you open the sadhana, and again, it's going to be really hard to see with the light back there. And this is what you're chanting. And so if I can just get this a little close to Avalokiteshvara. So this is like what a page looks like that you're chanting. So the page is, so you see these various lines. And so if you were, so this is written in English, Chinese, and Tibetan, right? So you just kind of chant the line that you can read, right? So you have often all the instructions are written into the text, including all the visualizations. So when you're beginning to do this practice, you're chanting. So you're chanting, there's a melody, there's a rhythm, and you're having to follow the visualizations and do the visualizations at the same time. So Tibetan practice is full of intense, complicated visualizations. Now, White Mahakala being an expression of Chenrezig, right? So the Mahakalas are protectors. White Mahakala is more associated with wealth, creating wealth. I don't know if it's quite worked for me yet. So when I began practicing, the first time I, started formally doing sadhana, we call it sadhana practice. So you just sit down, you get this, wad of scripture, and they're like, okay, here we go, we're going, So you're like reading it, trying to follow the melody, trying to like do the visualization at the same time, right? And yeah, it takes a while. It takes a while to figure out how to do that. So I bring all of this up to kind of, I would say, contextualize what we're doing, which is that I think it has been so powerful and impactful for me to kind of develop a different kind of practice where, as a teacher, I can cut through and bypass the anxiety that we may have being like sitting in this practice and getting some papers and told, okay, we're about to do it, right? I didn't, with so many of the practices, you're just told to just do it, just do it, just chant it, just do it. Even if you don't know what it is, like, it's great blessing, just do it. And it just wasn't enough for me anymore because I needed to be engaged much more with the practices, right? And so this is why I teach sadhana. This is still sadhana practice, but this is why I teach the practices in this way, because I want you to have the space just to go into the practice. Like you let me kind of like take the wheel, and you just kind of like sit in the practice and just move with it, I think that's why there's so many practitioners, Orthodox practitioners. I was an Orthodox practitioner. I don't consider myself an Orthodox practitioner anymore, but 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 I think a lot of Orthodox practitioners really don't know really how to talk about these practices, really talk about the essence of these practices, because I think sometimes they find themselves, as I did, bound to the text itself, right? But the text is an expression of the phenomenal world, right? It's more than these like papers, which are sacred and have been transmitted and passed down for in terms, depending on the practice, but for thousands of years, right? If you trace the practices, not just beginning in Tibet, but tracing these practices even into Southeast Asia, right? Into these kind of these early Vedic communities and early Buddhist communities, that were forming. These practices come out of just sitting together and creating. I believe it comes out of like a collective process, a collective generation of practice where people were getting together and figuring out, these practices collectively. Not always someone saying, "Oh, I have this idea," or "I've gotten this vision," or "I've had this dream," right? And "I've had this download. Okay, let's all do it." I think it was a collective process, right? In the same way Christianity developed as a collective communal experience, after Jesus passed on. So this is what we're doing, right? And I call this essence practice, where we get to the essence. We get to the points. And I spent so many of my practice years not really knowing what the point of a lot of practices were, right? And I became a Lama not knowing what the point of a lot of these practices were. I was just like, all I do is sit around and chant, And not that not that I'm saying that we're always trying to look for an experience. It's not saying that either. But what I'm saying is that like I should be able to talk about a practice that I'm doing and relate it to what I'm moving through in the world. Like so an example would be, I should be able to take the practice of Medicine Buddha into the world and use it at any point, at any given time. I should be trained to know how to turn my mind to Medicine Buddha at any time. I need to practice. And to be able to understand how Medicine Buddha arises in different contexts. And maybe in these different contexts, we call the practice something different, right? I think another issue, and this is an issue with many people in different paths, right? But one of the main issues, I think, is also that we don't know how to place our practices in conversation with other systems of practice, as well. Like we need to know how to do that, because that really deepens like interfaith dialogue and learning. And I think something that really bothers me even more, is like when we're so afraid. And I'll speak specifically from where I come from, so being trained in Tibetan Buddhism, the kinds of, like, what's the word? The ways that you are taught to not critique, just the biases that you're taught in the tradition against other traditions, where you're saying, well, that tradition doesn't work, that path doesn't work, and even in my school, in my path, of Tibetan Buddhism, we would, you would definitely hear comments about how other schools of Buddhism, just couldn't get you enlightened. You would hear that. You would specifically hear those statements, not just from regular practitioners like me, but you would hear the statements from leaders of the lineage, you know. And so you have that, you struggle through that, that kind of bias. And there are people who just haven't done the work to disrupt that. Now, I'm not saying that this is exclusive to Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism, because I have friends in other traditions who have told me the same thing that they were taught about Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism, you know? And that kind of has to stop. That needs to like kind of end. The superiority of practices really creates, ultimately, it creates a lot of misunderstanding, and that leads to violence. It really does. It leads to cult mentalities, right? And it's not helpful for our enlightenment. So I don't want to, of course, I'm not talking shit about anyone, right? This isn't what's happening, but I will just say that it's important for all of us, particularly for those of us who are new to practice, to always maintain an open mind about the power of different spiritual practices. What we're doing may be wonderful and powerful, but there are many other practices that are wonderful and powerful as well, that may look very different than what you're doing, right? That doesn't make it lesser than, right? So I think this is also about developing a confidence. I'm very confident in what I do in terms of the practices that I take refuge in. Like, it helps me to do the work of reducing harm and awakening wisdom and compassion, which is really all I'm trying to do anyway in practice. I don't feel the insecurity, I don't feel any of that. I don't feel the need to attack or to judge. What I do feel the need to do sometimes is just point out the ways maybe in which people are not doing practice in a way that feels spacious, because that lack of spaciousness actually can create friction with other paths, as well. I was, I've told this story before, I was very fortunate to be, in environments and spaces with people that I was raised to run away from. And I'm talking specifically, I had a good friend years ago who was a Satanist. And actually, this was in graduate school. And my friend was a Satanist. And when she first disclosed that, and she was very open, this wasn't a secret, she was very open. I felt the visceral reaction. I was like, uh-oh. My mama told me to avoid Satanists. But as we became friends, right? Because she's actually quite badass. And the way that she just talked about what she did and what she believed in, and how there was such the school of Satanism that she practiced in so reflected Tantra. I was like, oh, this is really quite rich, right? And it wasn't about evil either. It wasn't centering evil, it was centering the relationship with dualities, So I got a lot out of our relationship. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't schools of Satanism that are very dark. There are, right? And certain kind of lineages working with different kinds of demonic presences and energies, that's very real, right? It's very real and it's very powerful. And I'm not saying it's powerful in a good way. I'm just saying it's quite potent practice. And you just recognize that. You just recognize, that there's a variety of practices, and some of these practices are definitely not conducive to my well-being. But there are practices that are where I just have had to challenge myself to move deeper into a relationship with the practice instead of just standing on the outside and just saying, okay, what the hell is this? And I'm not going to deal with this. Um, I hope one of the things that you are getting out of these sessions, I know some of you um, are brand new to this form of practice. And then this is Tantra. This is all just Tantra, right? I'm talking about different ways of communicating practice and leading practice, but this is all Tantric practice. So I will always be a Tantric practitioner, Tantrika, is one of the phrases we call ourselves. I'm always going to do that. Like, that's my core. Tantra is my core lens in which I view the multiplicity of reality. And saying that, I know I still need to go and see everything everywhere because everyone's like raving about it still. I have to make that a point this week to do that. But anyway, but what was I saying? What was I saying? I was saying something about multiplicity and diversity. It was going to be a good point too. I totally forgot it. Oh, I know some of you. I was just saying, some of you are new here. Yeah, I think one of the important things to keep in mind, and that's where I've lost it. So I completely lost that line of thought, but it'll come back in the middle of practice as it always does. A tantric lens. Yeah, always a tantric lens. And after that, it still goes blank. It was going to be a really good point before I diverted myself. Um, uh, it'll come back. So just to finish this up, and then we'll get into practice. Yeah. I had to make a choice in my practice to challenge my practice. And this is a really important thing to do. We have to test the durability and the resiliency of our practice. And you do that by actually practicing in the world and just being in situations and saying, I'm going to do my practice and I'm going to see what happens. you know? And the more you do that challenging and the more you take your practice into all kinds of issues, the more the practice will open and deepen and develop into something that's really quite dynamic. Right? Um, you know, but if you don't do that, like your practice isn't going to grow, right? And this is one of the reasons I left Orthodox Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana spaces. Because I just felt like, well, this is why I left a lot of Buddhist spaces actually, because I just felt like we weren't practicing with the world. It was like we were practicing to bypass the world, not practicing with the world itself. Um, we're not, even though we're always talking about emptiness, right, and the essence of things, we're trying to experience the essence of things by going into the experience of the phenomenal world. We're not trying to bypass the phenomenal world. You know, we're trying to get into the essence of everything. To get into the essence of one thing is to get into the essence of everything. And I think that is like the most beautiful, amazing part of Tantra is that like you figure out what one thing is, you figure out what everything is. Right? So you start with what you want to figure out. So I think about Tara. There's a really beautiful story about Tara. We practiced a little bit of Tara yesterday. Um, and Tara being the Buddha of compassion. There's so many different origin stories for her. But one of my favorite origin stories that I actually often use, well, I used to use often for practice, was that Tara achieved enlightenment by tracing the origin of sound in her meditation. Um, and I've done this a few times. Some of you may have been with me when I've done this, in person, where I've used a bell, and you use the bell and you sound the bell, and the instruction is to ride the sound of the bell and allow the sound as it gets, as it dies down, right? To allow that dying sound to really hold your attention into the emptiness that it is dispersing into. And that was a really powerful practice, actually. And that's, one of Tara's origin stories, right? And that's something you can just do whenever you want. Like you can get a bell or whatever and just use the sound of the bell as an anchor and rest your mind, your attention in that anchor, and then just let it guide you deeper and deeper into emptiness as it, gets softer and softer. Um, you know, um, this durability of practice is the only way the practice is going to deepen. Like if you just sit here and do practice with me and don't do it any other time, or if you're out in the world and you're not thinking about it and reflecting on it, then it doesn't go anywhere. Like it doesn't grow, right? It's like planting a seed. Like we get this seed planted in practice, right? But you don't water it outside of practice, right? You only water it when you're here, but you have to water it continually, by thinking about practice, by reflecting on it, by just by you know just sitting and saying, oh, the whole world, everything, all phenomena is actually an expression of the deity. And what does that mean? That everything, even the things that like really bother and trigger us, even that's an expression of the deity. And what does that mean? Right? Because that kind of process actually begins to awaken deeper meanings of this lineage. Um, right? So why am I always going to use the tantric lens? Because it was the tantric lens that woke me up to the nature of things, right? You know, but the tantric lens is something that is connected to many ways in which people have understood the nature of reality. We just call it tantra, right? You know, but this is the thing when we come into systems, you have a core system. Like no matter how diverse and dynamic people may be, as practitioners or whatever whatever spiritual path it is, there's a core thing. Like you have to have a foundational core lineage that you're coming from, you know. Like you have to have something that stabilizes your practice as you're exploring maybe other forms and lineages of practice, right? The people, and when you don't have this core foundational lineage, and you start doing a whole bunch of other things, we call this New Age spiritualism. New Age spiritualism is actually the lack of a foundational practice or lineage, or we may call it lineage. When you don't lack that, when you lack a foundational lineage that you're starting from, then it's hard for you to stabilize and deepen practices. You need the ground. So lineage is the earth. You need the earth to do work. Like you need the earth to hold you. If you don't have that, you're just doing a whole bunch of shit that actually doesn't add up to do anything. And actually, when you don't have a lineage and you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, then all of that becomes fuel for ego fixation. The ego will actually co-opt all the things that you're exploring, right? And again, this is what we call New Age spiritualism. You know, part of New Age spiritualism says that, oh, you don't have to be grounded in one, right? But you actually need to be grounded in one, you know? And that's where you spring from. You know, that's the home base. You know, even for Christian mystics, you know, it's the same thing. Christianity is the home base, even though I know Christian mystics who are just doing a whole bunch of stuff, but they always come back to that Christian mysticism, you know. You know, um, you know, the pillars that hold up your practice, exactly. You know, like you need a language. You need a basic language to work with. And then you can learn other languages, right? But you need something like, what is your native language here in practice? And this, so Tantra is my native language. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh used to teach that, you know, whatever spiritual path or religion you were born into, whatever you were raised up in, that's your core path. You know, I don't think that's always the case. You know, because when I converted to Tantra from Christianity, Tantra like completely replaced. I didn't really like I never, you know, when I was growing up as a Christian, I never understood anything. Nothing stuck with me. But when I started Tantra was like, oh, this is how I've always felt. You know, Tantra for me revealed that like I'd always been a Tantric practitioner, right? You know, this is why I could never understand Christianity growing up. Now I understand Christianity. You know, it's taken that and plus a divinity degree to understand Christianity. You know, you know, be rooted in practice, right? The rootedness is what we're talking about. You know, and plus when I'm doing other things, you know, when I'm, you know, like off, like, you know, working with other kinds of spiritual teachers, um, like I may not be able to explain the practice from their perspective, but I can translate it in tantric terms, and that's the way I can get into practice. I can say, "Oh, this is what's happening," you know, from what I understand from my tantric practice, right? Um, and I've said this before too. It's like it's so important for those of you who are teachers to develop as much as you can, right? I know this is really hard, to develop ways of talking about your practice in different ways for people who are coming from different traditions, really, you know, um, to become like multilingual in the sense where I can, when I sit and do, so you know, we're going to do Medicine Buddha, right? And how would you explain, for those of you who have been doing Medicine Buddha for a while with me, like how would you explain Medicine Buddha, you know, to a fundamental Christian practitioner? Oh, but actually, it's fundamental also like evangelical Christians. You know, I'm just saying Christianity because that's of course what I came up with. You know, but whatever's more appropriate for you. But like, how do you explain? And I have actually explained what I do to both fundamentalist Christians, and the evangelical Christians. It's easier. I know this is a weird statement to say, particularly in this country, the U.S. I can have some really interesting conversations with evangelical Christians, quite, and I have quite a bit. And it's been very generative as well. Because there's so much, again, using my lens of Tantra to talk about evangelical Christianity, I can say that, like this kind of idea that you can have a personal relationship with the deity actually mirrors my practice, that I engage in. Like, I do believe I have to have a personal relationship with the deity that I'm practicing with, right? And so that's a doorway, so you can create this kind of interfaith dialogue, with people. But it also takes practitioners who, well, this is going to open up a whole can of worms, but you can't take your practice so seriously. Well, I mean, that's a nuanced statement. You can't, and this is a tantric statement, right? Like, this is very tantric, where it's like you can't be so serious about your practice, but on the other hand, you have to be really serious about your practice. Again, so this is the Heart Sutra happening, where it's like, I told you I was going to practice, and now it's like almost an hour into the session. I haven't practiced, but we're going to get there after I say this. When I say you can't be so attached to your practice, you can't be so serious about your practice, because seriousness, like that intense seriousness, can actually lapse into really intense fixation and contraction. So you get really serious about something, you get really like tight and shut down. And a lot of us are going through this, not just with spiritual practice, but with political views, with some of the other things in our life, where we're getting so tight. This is who I am, right? But there has to be spaciousness in whatever we're identifying with, especially spiritual practice. So serious, and that seriousness also it comes from anxiety, because we actually haven't practiced deep enough to experience being. So when we get really serious about spiritual practice, it's an expression of grasping. We're grasping, right? And the anxiety comes from not feeling as if we've grabbed onto something enough. So we think the antidote is just to get more serious. When in Tantra, actually the antidote is to relax, to be, Yes, the practice is serious. Yes, I take the practice seriously, but also allow there to be a lot of space in the practice. So I'll stop it there, because I think there's a lot that I can keep going on about. That was a great question. I feel one could talk to any Christians who are really connected to saints or relics, as a sort of touchstone, isn't it? But I think one thing that Christians should really kind of examine is that, like, Christianity is a conglomeration of a whole lot of different rituals, pagan practices, magic traditions, cults, that were really quite influential during the early development of Christianity. I think that is one of the things that has to be pointed out, is that, like, there's an incredible amount of magic in Christianity that's been bypassed. Well, you still do it. It's still being done, but it's not being named as such, right? I just think this is all just so fascinating, right? And this is why I went to divinity school, was to study this. But to say, lastly, just to say that, like, no matter how unique and special I think my spiritual practice is, it's very likely that you can find a reflection of it in another spiritual path that you had no idea had anything to do with your practice. You know, um, so um, let's start practice. Let's get into practice. If there are more questions at the end, we'll get to that. Those questions. So let's always start practice with allowing our bodies to come into a position, right, that feels appropriate for us. Um, so if I weren't leading the practice, I would probably more than likely be lying down, just to let you know, just to disclose. Um, but allowing your body to come into a position. And I encourage you next to just really form an intention for practice. Like, why are you practicing? Why are you here? You know, like what inspired you? Not just to come and do medicine Buddha practice, but what inspires you to do practice, period. Like, why do you practice? And that's where you find your intention, right? Right? You can practice, your intention can be to achieve enlightenment or to develop wisdom and clarity and patience, to suffer less. All those are valid. You know? And we're going to move through all three of our mantras as well. And so we'll eventually start with the opening mantra and then go into our main mantra and then close out with Durga's mantra. So we're actually going to start open with our mantra, our first mantra, before we continue. So Minla Sange Kino Soha, which translates into Medicine Buddha. Please think of me. That's the literal translation. But we translate it also as Medicine Buddha, please come. Medicine Buddha, please awaken. Medicine Buddha, please consider me. Medicine Buddha, please hold me, take care of me, tend to me. That's the generative, creative expression of the mantra. And that's where I want you to go with this. When we're beginning to chant the mantra, you ask yourself, what do you need from Medicine Buddha right now? And that's what you're chanting, you're asking for. This mantra is a prayer. So if you need Medicine Buddha to think of you, that's great. If you need Medicine Buddha to heal you, to take care of you, that's all great as well. So this is personal. This is up to you. Like, what do you need right now? And that's what you're chanting for, to awaken or to invite the consciousness of Medicine Buddha to be here in your practice. Okay? And so when we chant it, we're believing too that Medicine Buddha is arriving, that the Medicine Buddha, that the energy, but to begin with, the energy around us actually begins to awaken into a kind of intelligence, a compassionate, loving intelligence. And that is the consciousness of the Buddha, right? And particularly in this case, Medicine Buddha. So I wonder what that feels like to connect to how energy awakens and becomes intelligent and loving in the space around you as we do this opening mantra. Okay? So we'll begin. We'll chant this a few times as well. Om La Sangye Kino Soha. Om La Sangye Kino Soha. Om La Sangye Kino Soha. So imagining, even if we can't connect to this, but beginning to imagine that indeed the space around you, the energy around you is awakening as the consciousness of Medicine Buddha, that everything around you becomes an expression of this enlightened consciousness. An enlightened consciousness is only a consciousness that knows itself, right? A consciousness, or an awareness that knows itself, that knows it's aware. For our consciousness, right, we're still struggling to become aware of our awareness, or for our consciousness to become aware of consciousness itself. So that's where we're at. But when we talk about awakened beings and the awakened consciousness of beings, these consciousnesses know that they're awakened. There's no doubt, there's no confusion, right? Awakened consciousness is the exhaustion of confusion. So what does that feel like? To imagine this consciousness of Buddha, Medicine Buddha, to awaken around you in your space. How does that change your relationship or your experience of space right now? Maybe another way to get into this is, what does it feel like to imagine that space itself around you loves you? That the energy wants to protect you, to heal you, to get you free. And this is a really basic practice that you can practice anytime when you're out in the world. Like when you're doing something else, just to stop and to say, oh, what does it mean for the space and the energy in the space to want me to be well and free and loved? And when I feel maybe in danger, or when I feel the fear or the anxiety, or for some of us, we talked about this last week or a couple of weeks ago, when we go into public spaces now and feeling, just the fear of being in public right now, given all the violence that's been happening, for those of us who have to be in public spaces, like, how can you turn your mind to a mantra like this and to begin to awaken the love, the compassion, the intelligence of the energy around you, and how that could be a way to prevent other energies from overwhelming the space that lead to violence. So if you're really listening to this, what I've just explained is the mechanics of blessing something, right? This is why we have blessings of land and spaces and objects, because it awakens this loving, generative energy that begins to counter and balance and hopefully overwhelm energies that are not awakened, harmful energies, darker energies, right? A dark energy is energy that is not aware, right, of itself. That is actually an expression of confusion itself. So we bless things, we bless spaces, right, in order to awaken this positive conscious energy to benefit and to help. So when you're in a space that feels just really intense, like public spaces, just do this practice. Just chant. And allow this energy to awaken, allow the energy of this chant to awaken the conscious, loving energy in the space. Anyway, returning back into the practice, right? Just sitting within this awakened energy in the space, in your space. And so when you're ready, let's actually shift our attention down to the seat. Again, just noticing the weight of our bodies making contact with the seat. This is part of our grounding practice. You can't and you shouldn't try to launch into the ultimate without first acknowledging and grounding in the relative. Because this is where our bodies are, we're in the relative. So acknowledge that and allow the body to actually take care of us as we move deeper into what can feel like a very abstract, kind of absolute experience. And when you're ready, connecting even deeper to the earth, acknowledging the earth, the land under you. If we're somehow touching the floor, we're in contact with the floor, that's a connection that we can just shift our attention into, like my foot is on the floor. Right now, the floor is an expression of the earth, so I feel disconnected. I feel connected to the earth right now through my foot and the floor. And feeling that groundedness. The seat is also an expression of the earth. In any case, we're being held, we're being grounded, we're being stabilized. Right? And I wonder if through these experiences of being grounded and stabilized, if you can experience this as being loved and cared for. So being held by the seat, being held by the earth, the floor, can you experience that as care, as being cared for? And I wonder if you can just allow yourself to really kind of sink into this experience of care. Because again, as I've said often, the phenomenal world is always trying to take care of us, but we just don't get that. We don't pay attention. So noticing the seat taking care of you, noticing the floor under you rising to meet you, to hold you, just to begin with, because there's so much more happening in the phenomenal space around us. But beginning here, and if you haven't felt cared for at all today, right, which is common for many of us, can you experience this care right now from the earth and from your seat? Maybe even thinking and reflecting on how the floor doesn't want anything from you but to hold you. And when you start connecting to this experience of care, you at the same time are connecting to the care or the consciousness of the deity, right? So in this case, we're connecting to the consciousness of Medicine Buddha as Medicine Buddha is expressed through the holding of our seat in the earth. So this is what I mean we've been talking about tonight so far. Like, how can I begin to connect to the deity in everything, including the experience of sitting on a seat or lying on the floor? So this care, right, that we're connecting to, which is also an expression of Medicine Buddha, I wonder if you can allow this experience to really begin to, I would say, fill you up, like to allow yourself to be deeply immersed and saturated by this experience of care, which is also the experience of the deity, right? So when you feel held by the seat or by the floor or the earth under you, allowing that experience of care to really saturate, dominate everything right now. To be consumed by this experience of care, which again is the experience of the deity in this case as well. And so, as this energy of care or the awakened consciousness of Medicine Buddha is really like awakening for you, wonder if you can begin or start offering everything that maybe you're struggling to be with into this experience of care, right? So letting go, for instance, of the anxiety and the fear about something. And imagine just like letting it go and letting it float into this experience of care that we're beginning to experience. For those of you who are familiar with the ocean like mind practice, where you're imagining your mind as this vast, limitless ocean, boundless ocean. And then everything that we're struggling with, all the discomfort, the suffering, we imagine is transformed into like really beautiful flowers. And how we imagine casting these flowers out onto the ocean of the mind and just feeling these flowers, which used to be the suffering, kind of float out into the spaciousness of the mind. So this is essentially what we're doing, is letting go of just everything that we're just struggling with about the world, and just for a moment, just letting it go. Believe me, it's going to come back. So don't get worried. But in this moment, what we're trying to do is dissolve some fixation on this discomfort. And that's overall going to create more space so that we can be in a little more fluid, open relationship with the things that we're struggling with in the long run. So just offering all of this into this experience of care. And as you move deeper into that practice, we'll move into the first part of our mantra practice, which is moving into the second mantra, or the main mantra. So Teata Bacon say Maha Bacon say Rasa Sumungate Soha. Again, a prayer to Medicine Buddha. So as we begin this, you can chant along or you can listen. Again, just like our first mantra, like we're really deepening and awakening the consciousness of Medicine Buddha. Of course, the consciousness of Medicine Buddha is the consciousness of all Buddhas, is also our consciousness, right? And we would know that if our awareness was aware of itself, right? So until then, we're engaging in this mantra practice to awaken the consciousness, this awakened intelligence in us and around us, until we slowly begin to see this awakened consciousness as a reflection of our own consciousness, right? And that is the core practice of Buddhist Tantra. The Buddhist side of Tantra is actually recognizing that the deity, that we're just reflections of the deity, right? So just sitting in this care, imagining the awakening of a deeper experience of consciousness as we move into the mantra. All right. So te a tong de genze ma de genze raza sumunga de soa. Te a tong de genze ma de genze raza sumunga de soa. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raza sumungate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raza sumungate sua. Beata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raza sumungate soa. 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 Beata begenze, Beganze, Maha Beganze, Laza Sumagati Sua, Tehata Beganze, Beganze, Ma 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 Beganze, Laza Sumagati Sua. We're going to transition now to offering our prayers before going back into the second part of the main mantra. Right? So again, just making a special request for all Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Dharma protectors, all saints, deities, benevolent ancestors, all the elements, including the earth, all the beings connected to the lands that we're practicing on, all spirits of light, all beings of good and justice. I invite you to gather and to hear our prayers, and we ask that you work on our behalf to bring about the fruition of the prayers that we really need support around. When we begin, offering prayers for my grandma who is ready to transition, but her body keeps hanging on, and that our family may remain focused on her peaceful passing. We're offering prayers for Janet and her great niece and great nephews who she is caring for. We're offering prayers for those who are gripped by despair and are isolated, that they experience connection, joy, and safety. We're offering prayers for Sean, Todd, Becky, Ben, Russell, Tracy, and Kent, that they recover fully from COVID. Offering prayers for patience and freedom from pain as I continue to recover from a difficult surgery. We're offering prayers for Finn, Cordwin, Morgan, and Lilac. Offering prayers for my sister who is struggling with addiction and affects her health. Offering prayers for myself and my partner as we grieve for the loss of our beloved dog 1 week ago. Prayers for teachers and students at schools in the U.S. Offering prayers for me and all of us suffering the self-inflicted wounds of judgment and self-criticism. A prayer for Mars and everyone who is seeking direction and connection. Offering prayers for my mother as she makes a crucial decision about her health. Prayers for Kitty Ng, who is sick in the vet hospital. For my wife as she works to remember the value of motherhood for a society that undervalues it. Prayers for the exhaustion I see all over my community. May people get the rest and restoration they need. Prayer requests for my husband and I as we near our 20th anniversary. Prayer requests for everyone to experience some hope and care, and prayers to help me make some health decisions. Offering prayers for my son who is young and recently disabled with MS, suffering, and is just trying to hang on. Offering prayers for all the animals of this hurting earth, and for all the indigenous people, that they may remain strong, healthy, and connected to one another and to the land. Offering prayers for Yael's health. Offering prayers Offering prayers for my cousin Bill, who died unexpectedly on Saturday, leaving behind his wife, two children, mother, brother, and many family and friends. May our shock and grief soften. Prayers for my father, who is dying but finding it hard to leave this life. Prayers for my sister, who is his primary caregiver at this time. And offering prayers for all the parents of children who have been killed. May the Sangha continue to grow in compassion and love. Offering prayers for my sisters and I as we try and unwind from transgenerational trauma, that we are able to discern what must be left behind and readily let go of it all. Praying for teachers, young people who are in schools in the United States. Offering prayers for all sex workers, specifically trans POC sex workers. May they be safe and protected, nourished and loved. Offering prayers for my daughter and all other children seeking to continue to see school as a space of learning and refuge rather than one of fear and potential danger. Prayers for those in my community reacting with fear, with anger, out of fear. Prayers for me as I navigate a long road ahead of emergency dental and medical work as a precarious person with a history of trauma in the midst of a tumult of difficulty. Please pray for my health as I um, please pray for my health as I am dealing with a severe health condition that is majorly compromising my health and body and life. Requesting prayer for my mother and all single Black mothers to experience self love, healing, and liberation. Prayers for my blood and chosen family, my lineage, my ancestors, for me, my body. Prayers for my care pods, my academic pursuits and career paths. Prayer for all beings, all the elements, and for Bumi Ma that gives and holds life. Prayers for all healers, for every act of kindness and peace, limitless abundant love, and prayer for Lama Rod for his leadership in and for liberation for all. May we all be richly blessed as we do the work to be and support freedom. Prayers for all those so completely entrenched in systems of white supremacy, exploitation, and patriarchy that they cannot see the path to freedom. That thing they cannot see the path to freedom must include the work of its renunciation, including many people in my family. Right? And I continue to pray also for Scouty that they have um, that they're able to make it through therapy, through surgery without obstacles. Um, as I continue to pray for all of us in this space, that we have what we need in order to experience restoration and freedom, that we have what we need in order to support our communities and all others around us who need the support right now. I pray for this world and all world systems experiencing so much suffering, that the suffering may give way to true compassion, true wisdom, clarity. That all systems of violence, all systems of marginalization are completely disrupted and completely abolished. May we enter into a true relationship with who and what we are, and that we are able to all, as quickly as possible, enter into the experience of liberation, complete and unsurpassable enlightenment. We all get free as quickly as possible. So as we return back into the main mantra just for a couple of minutes, imagine that the care that we've been sitting in and working with, that it begins to be extended and radiated into all the prayers and all the lives of the people that we've prayed for, that this care is radiated, helping them to get the care and the resources that they need in order to be well, free, and happy. O te atom begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. 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 Te ata begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, ma begenze, begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumungate sua. So shifting our attention back to the seat, again, reconnecting to the weight of the body, the contact that the seat and the body are making, connecting to the earth under us. And we'll begin our transition into our last mantra, the mantra of Durga Ma. And this is our mantra of really protecting what we've awakened, sealing the aspirations that we've made, but also allying with Mother Durga in this way as, again, as another expression of an awakened consciousness, right? Allying with this awakened consciousness to really cultivate this sense of protection for us right now, a protection for us and for those that we are caring for and for our communities right now. So Durga Ma, Mother Durga becomes a practice of awakening energy of protection for ourselves and others. Right. So as we're practicing this, I like to practice Durga Ma. Imagining just a blue radiance emanating from my heart center, filling my body, and actually radiating from my body into the space, the world around me. And imagining that the same blue radiance is surrounding all those that I care about, the communities that I come from, and those who I'm praying for. So they have this added protection and practice, okay? So Dum Dagaye Namaha. And we'll just chant this for just a minute or two, okay? Om Dum Dagaye Namaha. 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 Om Dum Dayaye 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 Namaha. May you all and all those that you care for and practice for be surrounded perpetually in the protective arms of all the Buddhas and all the benevolent deities. All right. Thank you for your practice. We're going to just go right into Shantideva's prayer. Now, we're going to recite this 3 times. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away, and may I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And finally, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach unto the ends of space. Right. Thank you, everyone, for your practice. I won't be able to get to the questions tonight. I'm sorry. But if you can bring those back next week, I'll be happy to answer those. Um, let's see. Just, check our schedules, Bumi Sparsha, and my personal schedule, lamarod.com. I will be offering um, a Dharma talk for East Bay Meditation Center on Thursday evening. So you just kind of have to look at the time zones for that. So that's going to be West Coast time zone for that talk, and that's online. I think that's, I'm not, you have to go on and look at the details. East Bay Meditation Center out in Oakland. I know some of you are joining from Oakland tonight. Okay. I think that is it. And I will see you again as well as soon as possible, I guess. All right. Thank you, everyone. Be well.